parents might be looking for stuff in Blue. Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. If you can do me a favor, just make sure you're muted, my panelists. And if you would like, we'd love to see you on camera. If it's possible, you don't have to be, but I want to make sure that this is a round table, so we're all kind of having this open conversation. Love to see your wonderful faces. Everybody's getting tuned in. Give it a few more seconds. So I see some familiar faces. This makes me very excited. You have made my Tuesday night. Can't begin to tell you. All right, I'm gonna begin. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amanda Espinoza. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Education and Community Engagement Manager at Two River Theater. And I wanted to welcome you to this roundtable, The Joy of the Arts in the Autism Community. This is one of our last event here at Two River Theater for our Autism Acceptance Month. We've had an entire month of celebration of creating theater exercises, and I see two of my amazing teaching artists, Maria and Amanda Budaba here, who helped build these incredible theater exercises, resources, in a live story time that Amanda had. So you can also continue to look on our website and our social media for a lot of the works that we've done throughout the month. And I really wanted, tonight's roundtable for all of us as an opportunity for us to share our work, our ideas and stories of our connection to the autism community. So, this isn't a lecture or an educational. I'm not going to sit here and pull up a bunch of PowerPoints or do anything. What my goal was to bring us all on this table and talk about, the arts in the autism community, what the joy is coming from an artist perspective, a parent, us being on this anyone being on the autism spectrum. It's us to have a voice in this moment and to talk about the things and what's impacting our community. What can we do? And what can we celebrate and give more opportunities for those on the spectrum and wherever you're from. So I also want you, if you can, this is a really fun activity for me, probably not for anyone else, but in the chat, if you want to add where you're tuning in from, what state you're from, because I'd love to know if other people are from not New Jersey. I know a few people are from out of state, and I'd love to see that, where you're from. And again, please feel free to turn on your cameras if you'd love to join us and you're doing something else, but we're in the background. Excellent. I see Cleveland, Ohio. Amazing. Welcome.
Ohio.
Yeah. Tom's River.
I got a better off.
Good.
I'll throw a hot dog on for you in a minute.
You're good.
All right.
You're good.
Hello, darling.
Hello.
We'll make sure. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Zooming from Red Bank. Well, thank you so much for adding to that. Again, I'm Amanda Espinoza, Education and Community Engagement Manager, and I'm not the only one who will be speaking a little bit. I opened this opportunity for various artists that we've worked with and parents and creators in this community to talk a little bit too about themselves and help me join this conversation and get this going. So I want to introduce my guests, which is Jane Kleiman and Devin Fletcher. And I'll throw it to Devin first, but when you introduce yourselves, if I could, for my other panelists joining this, could you let me know a little bit of what you're working on or what you've worked on in relation to the autism community and anything you would like to share with us? So thank you. Take it away, Devin.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you all, and thanks for joining us tonight. Zooming in from Red Bank. My name is Devin Fletcher, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm the co-artistic director of Bluelaces Theater Company, which is a theater company based in New York City that creates multi-sensory immersive theater for audiences with autism and other developmental disabilities. And we work with actors and artists who are also autistic and have developmental disabilities. So it's kind of a holistic process that way. And we talked about this before. It's sort of hard to I process very visually, and it's sort of hard for me to describe sometimes. So I'm going to show a few images for you all. I hope that's okay. I'm going to describe as I go, and I'm about to share my screen. Let's see if this actually works. Okay. Whoa. Can you all see that? Thumbs up. Thank you, Brad. Oh, I love a thumbs up. It's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. So this is from one of our earliest shows, which has now been produced 5 times, called Suds. And so our biggest goal as a theater company is to create an environment that is welcoming to everyone, and that is truly filled with sensory play and sensory joy, because we found as we did research that so many traditional art spaces, be they theaters or concert halls or museums, are so unwelcoming to the autism community. And so we wanted to make this a space where pretty much anything goes and where anyone is welcome and can fully participate. It's not this kind of rigid sense of like, you sit in your seat and we're going to be up here. It's very interactive. And so Suds is one of our most prolific productions. We've brought it to Lincoln Center. We've brought it to Long Island University. We brought it to the American Repertory Theater in Boston. So I just love this still because it's got bubbles, which is the best. And this one, of course, is in the washing machine because it's called Suds. It's about the joys of laundry and the process of what that means. There is a narrative. There's a laundry monster who turns out to be a very nice man named Greg. But one of our biggest kind of touchstones in the process is something that we call adventure guiding, where we have specific members of our company who are partnered with every audience member to kind of be their partner through the experience. And there are touchstones within the story, but for the most part, the audience kind of has control and agency. Eventually, we started kind of melding the adventure guide element into character work as well. And here we have the wonderful Nick Ong. But for the most part, our earlier shows were pretty gauged towards younger audiences and just sticking with the kind of experience of being in this space and being with each other and our families and our caregivers. We also always work with having a nonverbal character in the show. Here's one of them. And are dedicated to all sorts of work and needs. This is then from our most recent show, which is called Muse. And we developed it for older audiences because we wanted to have it remain inclusive and not have anyone come away feeling like they're being talked down to. So this piece has very strong narrative, was developed with older actors, and also developed with older audiences as part of the process. And that's what I got. Oh. So then recently in the past year, we've been doing more virtual work, which has been really fascinating because initially we were kind of like, well, we do immersive sensory theater. Like, how do you translate that into this very distanced way? But we did a piece with Lincoln Center called The Sensational School, and it was phenomenal. So I don't want to take up any more time, but it was just really exciting to see how being in our own spaces kind of influenced that process. But that's pretty much Bluelaces. And my work with this community is primarily through Bluelaces, but also sometimes CoLab, which is another great organization in New York. And then I've worked with Two River, which I love. So yeah, it's great to meet you all. And I look forward to talking with you more.
Wonderful. And then I'll pass it on to Jane. Introduce herself. Thank you.
Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Jane Kleiman, and I am primarily a parent of a now almost 20-year-old son with autism and intellectual disability. And I founded something called the Calm Within the Chaos, which is a movement and support group for parents We often find that parents don't get a lot of attention. We try to find programs for our kids, but we really do need our own space to process and to be with like-minded parents who understand what it's like to parent a child on the spectrum or with any other kind of developmental or intellectual issue. I've also been an ambassador for Two River Theater. So in the last year, we haven't been ambassadoring too much, but prior to that, really working with Amanda a lot, coming together, trying to, just bring in ideas on inclusivity and access, and ideas about things like making sure we're talking to older individuals as well, and not just to the little ones. It's so important, which, now that my son is older, it is just a big deal. You don't want everything to be in bright colors and about, little things. Although I will say, Devin, that the first piece you showed was absolutely amazing. And one of the things I love talking with Amanda about, and one of the things I'm so excited about talking with you all about, is the ways in which theater exercises and role playing can really help with ADLs, activities of daily living. So like doing the laundry and, all kinds of other things that we ask our kids to learn to do, but at some point, especially when they get older, they don't want to learn it from mom and dad anymore. And it's not always easy to get help in. But if it was a role play kind of situation where that kind of activity, that kind of thinking could be brought into schools and into the way that we teach ADLs, I think it would make a huge impact. Even job skills, and job coaching. I think job coaching and people who are looking to be job coaches would benefit greatly from learning some of these, the skills of and the practices of theater. And how do you pretend a situation and make it happen and make it fun? So those are things that I'm super excited about. I so wish this had been going on when my son was younger, because if I had been able to get him involved younger, I think he would be benefiting more now. I think now it's not so interesting to him anymore. But I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think there's such a huge opportunity here for the theater and for the arts to play a role, not just in entertainment and fun and just arts for the art's sake, but how well the arts can actually teach and aid our kids, our parents, in how they live their lives. So one of the other things I'm doing is a group of parents and I are starting to look at establishing a supported housing community for our sons who are all nearing 21. And for right now, it's mostly about housing and having support and safety and access to the community and that kind of thing. But we'd like to, of course, we're thinking about what activities they're going to do during the day, and how these kinds of things, bringing in a theater artist to work with the job coach, to help with life skills, to learn about taking care of your own house. There's a wonderful place in Arizona, and I am going to actually share my screen real quick. That, hang on, I'm not doing it right. Hold on. That uses this exact method, and they have just resumed their teaching and have brought in, oops, sorry, my things are moving all over the place here. Oh, hold a phone. Windows don't want to go where they should go. Or not. It's called First Place Arizona, and they bring in, there we go, teaching artists, and they work with the residents, and it's pretty amazing. And so we're looking at that as a way of incorporating and as a model for how we might move forward in the future. There we go. So this is their Instagram post. If you want to follow them on Instagram, I highly recommend it, because this is where they seem to be posting more of this kind of stuff, not so much on their website. But he comes in and each week talks about theater and creative expression, and they're getting more comfortable in their new and potentially challenging settings as they move through their lives. And so there's so many ways, even just in terms of handling sensory information, handling personal space. And, you know, there's so many ways that theater can help our kids and adults learn about that and come to understand that. And I just am so excited to be here and hear what everyone is all doing, and how all we can move forward and do more stuff. So that is my thing. I don't know if my screen ever shared or if it didn't. Did it ever
Oh, it
share?
did.
Didn't.
Yeah, it looks
Oh, it
great.
did. All right. Now I have to make it stop. Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah, so that's about,
Wonderful.
and yeah.
Well, thank you, Jane and Devin, for sharing those wonderful images and your work and what you're doing right now. And I think that's something that you know, I want to open up to other people as well. I want to hear a little bit. It's a roundtable, so again, we're not talking at you. We want to talk with you. And you know, Jane brought up something really incredible of, and what we're trying to do, and Two River has done too, is build residencies. We worked with ages pre-K through 12. And then, you know, I met Jane and working with Monmouth County in New Jersey was, you know, after 21, there's no programming. And I wanted to make sure that they were having ability to work in the arts, but also, you know, how can we use the arts to teach daily living skills? What are some other things to do? How can we start creating work too? And showing representation and being inclusive of, you know, artists being on the spectrum, or someone being on the spectrum and not playing a spectrum character, right? You know, how can we make artists and give them this opportunity, and being inclusive and looking at your environment, right? So we looked at New Jersey, and I see a few people that I worked with in Texas, so I'm excited to hear from them a little bit, because that was how I learned and did my research and growth there. But coming to New Jersey and learning, you know, 1 in 34, and you know, that's scary, you know, are on the autism spectrum, and a lot of times we would hear from people saying, you know, what's going on in New Jersey, and then you're here and you're learning, being in this area in the East Coast, about testing and programs and things that are being built where families have the option to test sooner. Their students, and you know, how the numbers are, we're looking at it in that way, right? Not a number of fear, but how many people are having more access to getting the help that they needed, and programming and funding for parents, and taking care of the caregivers that needed it. And seeing families who are relocating to these areas in order for that support, especially in the classroom, and finding those things. So I wanted to open the floor a little bit too, you know, if anybody else, and Jane, if you want to open it, if you want to raise your hand and you want to say, you know, something that you're working on, or have worked on in the past for the autism community, and just for us to kind of share these ideas of where it's going on. And I see Brian. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to say a few quick words, because I have to pop off to another meeting at 7:30. Hi everybody, I'm Brian Clotto. I'm from Edison, New Jersey. I work for Edison Workshop, a nonprofit occupational training center for adults with special needs, not just autism. I'm on the staff there. I did get services from there at one time. I've been employed with them over 12 years, and I'm an ambassador for the workplace. I'm almost 32, but yeah, I mean, I do wish that there were some more things available when I was growing up, because friendships definitely were a struggle for me at first, and I've just been trying to have breakthroughs in my life. One of those was making a friend at my workplace's annual dinner many years ago, and then reaching out to somebody through that person, and finding another group, which then led me to separate from, well, I don't know how to say separate, because technically I'm still a member of it, but I don't consider myself a member of it, the church I grew up at. So that was something I did, and then that led to new relationships outside of Edison. And then as the young adult stuff died down a little bit, I started doing networking a little bit more. Hence the reason that I put in my LinkedIn. A lot of it has been virtual over the last year. So the tough part is, like, when it comes to jobs, is I do get help from the state. So so that kind of ties my hands a little bit. But I definitely, like, I mean, as much as, I mean, I do want to stay involved with my organization, but I also am looking for ways to move forward as well. I have other skills. I'm part of a local Rotary Club. I can use Canva. I have a way of keeping connected with people through social media. So, but you know, it's a lot of work to put in with keeping connected with people, but I enjoy it. And for the arts part, I used to play trombone growing up. I never owned my own instrument, but I did play that, and that was my voice for a while. Not that I didn't have a verbal voice, I just didn't use it as much. And it's interesting, I did have interest in acting at one time, never pursued it, but yeah, I mean, it's a hard field to make it in, but I've been networking, and part of my networking has been the group I'm actually supposed to be going on the call with at 7:30. They helped me realize good referrals for me were people who run nonprofits or just groups for people on the autism spectrum. I try to do my networking locally because I wanted to be people that I could drive to meet in person. I do drive, so, and I do want to expand my driving horizons a little bit. And Monmouth County is definitely somewhere I'd like to drive to. So this is Brian Clotto, and I'm done speaking.
Brian, thank you so much. Well, I have your LinkedIn, I have some of your information, so we're going to connect, and I hope others feel this is a networking thing. So thank you for sharing that, and touching base with that, and letting us know what is needed, and the individuals in our community and what abilities various people have that we can start using. And I think that you've touched on something that we'll talk about too. I know that this may also be recorded, but we'll be sharing resources and whatnot from after this chat is done. So even though you're leaving for another meeting, we'll still be able to connect and share resources that we talked about, because I think one of the big things we'll talk about is employment for individuals. What kinds of employment is available? How can the arts be involved in creating jobs in this area in Monmouth County, and supporting this community? What can we do? What more can we do? Because we have a lot of abilities and skills and lives and voices that we should be supporting in the space and giving that inclusion. So thank you again, Brian, for that. We're really grateful.
Yes, you're welcome. And also too, I have an ability to learn online too. Never went to college, but I've done some online learning and earned a few certificates, some of which can be seen on my LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, and it's still on the floor for anyone who, what's your work in the autism community, something you're working on or have ideas about you want to share with us, please feel free to raise your hand or just speak a little bit or you're curious about. Oh, bye, Brian. Thank you. And the floor is open to anyone. If you want to talk a little bit. Just want everyone to share what cool things they're doing. I know y'all are doing cool things. You're hiding it from me.
We're always doing cool things. I'll speak. Amanda Butterbaugh, teaching artist with Two River Theater and on the board there, and sucked into Amanda's vision of how we were going to affect the community on a really incredibly small but incredibly large via impact little adventure that we started. She connected us with Harbor School, which of course is the younger community, and then Oasis, and through the Doorbrook Park system, we were moving to the 21 and older community that really gets quite lost and left on the sidelines once the government or those helping systems that have been put in place for them. And then they're just kind of pushed out into the world at 21, and still a lot of struggle trying to figure out how to function in a world, how to find a job, all the practicalities of life. I think so. We started our program principally dealing with trying to expose the communities to art itself. We did a 15-minute smashed version of 12th Night with the Oasis community that blew us out of the water. Their ability to interpret and understand the subtleties and the humor of Shakespeare, I think, astonished all of us. I think we weren't really expecting to be quite that connected. From the smallest thing at playing a theater game and making eye contact, and expanding that into saying lines with each other and actually looking at the other person that you're speaking to, and feeling a comfort in that when we began didn't exist. I find in the practicality of theater and games, the most impactful thing that I've found is the use of props. When we did the Shakespeare, we did it with giving each character their own special hat so that they could connect that character and their personality with the hat. And there was a comfort and an ease, pardon me, that came over the students when they realized that they had the freedom to express themselves and find a character based on this hat that they chose. It's just, it's been enriching for me. I'm amazed, Jane, at the parents and the parent-driven programs in schools that exist only because a group of parents sat down and decided that something needed to happen for their children, and they made that happen. Inspiring and incredible. And because of it, I feel that not only have we enriched that community, but I feel that my personal community is enriched by my connection now with these schools and these students. And I run into them now out in the world, and whereas having recognized a few of the students previously, recognizing that they're on the street and they're struggling and not communicating with anybody, they will scream my name from across the street when they see me and we connect and have a relationship beyond the relationship in the classroom. And I find that so blessed. I just feel blessed to be part of that community. Really. I think that's it for the moment.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yes, you spoke so lovely about the work that we've done, Amanda, and Maria too. You've been along this whole time. When I was just like, I have a crazy vision, you're like, okay, let's go. And sometimes that's it. It's just having that idea and trying it. Because there's a lot of people hungry for this and the work, and a lot of our goal, even in those residencies, were, you know, having a group of neurodiverse individuals and neurotypical working as equals, kind of going into that space. And when we worked with their, you know, one-on-ones, that we were training the one-on-ones to have these skills. So when they would take it to the classroom, they knew certain things and exercises we would use for, you know, eye contact, for breath and movement, and it started translating more. And so we were kind of making mini teaching artists along the way in their own world. So I'm glad the art kind of stuck in there, the arts integration in that room. So I wanted to open this question too, because we've been talking a lot about, you know, we see a lot of programming which is geared towards the younger ages, especially shows and relaxed performances or sensory performances. And at Two River, with my director of education, Kate Cordaro, who's amazing at this, is, you know, we introduced relaxed performances, and we started with our theater for young audiences. And then we started looking at the content of our shows, and our season was a little bit, you know, more advanced of, you know, Cyrano and Twelfth Night and all of this work we were doing. And we had to sit back and say, you know, if we're working with 21 and older, they want to have that adult content. We want people to come to the theater, to have experiences, to see the work that's being done. And we open that up in a way, very much to relaxed performances for those with sensory needs as well. And we started seeing more veterans too. So, you know, some people who did very well in a lower adjusted areas. And it was incredible to see, you know, someone, you know, on the spectrum of various, you know, abilities mixed with, like, it was so inclusive of us breathing the same air. And wow, I'm saying breathing the same air now, like, I'm like, that's never happened. That hasn't happened in a year, but something very moving. And I encourage other theaters and programming to be thinking of that, you know, when you see, you know, they just assume in a way, and I could be rambling too, if you have other opinions, I would love to hear other people. Where sometimes we're going to put the children's show or the Christmas special that we do every year, we're going to put that as a relaxed performance. And I'm looking at it in a way of like, we're storytellers, we're making this art. I want people to engage with what their age group is. You know, we're looking at giving them a space in that room, an opportunity. So I kind of want to open that up. You know, does anyone, you know, people having ideas or know of more programming around that is engaged towards supporting those 21 and over? Or Jane and Devin, if you know of other things and what Bluelaces is trying to do, or anyone who would like to speak and share some of your resources of what you have and have to offer so others can know. Well, that's just an open in for anyone to join in.
Amanda, I will just say that even before you were doing the relaxed performances, I had brought Jackson, is my son, to a Little Shakes performance, and he absolutely loved it. And it wasn't even relaxed. I was like, shh, shh, you know, the whole time. It wasn't like okay for him to talk, but he really liked it. And I think part of the reason was that they were high school kids, and he knew they were high school kids, and so he could identify, and he laughed when it was funny. I mean, he had no idea, you know, really what they were talking about or saying, or necessarily even what it was, but he did get the sense and of, you know, these characters are in trouble and these characters are, you know, goofing around. And so I think it's great to be thinking in terms of older people on the spectrum and with other disabilities. And it's surprising, even to me. Well, I wouldn't say even, but especially to me, because, you know, I'm thinking there's no way Jackson's going to sit through this performance, and he actually really enjoyed it. And I have to be careful. He has certain triggers so that I wouldn't bring him to a musical, you know, because although he loves music, women singing he doesn't love. So he would probably, you know, start to freak out about that. One thing I will say is that, so my son is on the higher support need of the spectrum, I want to say. And there are cognitive issues. And so, I encourage, when everyone's thinking about this, because it's a very hot topic right now in the autism community, is that our kids, not only do older adults, you know, adults over 21 and over, kind of get left out of the mix because they're no longer in school and there's no more entitlement, and it's, you know, they're not entitled to educate, you know, it's a whole thing, like it's called falling off the cliff. So they're struggling to, you know, figure out jobs, where to live, whatnot. Their parents are getting older. It's a whole, you know, pot of stew you have to swim through to figure it out. And one of the big topics right now is how adults that fall on the more severe end of the spectrum tend to be left out even of that when we're talking about adults. So it's something to keep in mind. It's one of the reasons we're doing this housing community, because a lot of day programs won't take an adult who might have a behavioral issue, even if it doesn't happen all the time, but it might happen. They can choose not to take, because the private providers get to choose who they accept into their program. So they choose the people who have the least care needs. And so, you know, there's a whole like array of adults who are getting left out completely of the programs, you know, the skeleton of programs that actually do exist. And so when you're thinking about programming and being inclusive, I just want to encourage everyone to think about that as well. I mean, and it's usually about breaking things down in just smaller pieces. So you're not gonna like act out a scene, but you're gonna learn what it's like to be taking turns, and how when I say something, you hear what I say and you have a response. So like, it's just breaking everything down into much smaller pieces. And that's why I think this whole thing could be so beneficial to kids like mine when they get to be adults, for jobs and living skills and social skills. Brian talked about how tricky it was to make friends, and how that's so much work for someone typically on the spectrum. And I say typically because, you know, everybody is completely individual. But it requires a lot of energy, it sounded like, on his part. And I don't want to speak for him, but that's a thing too, is how to make friends, how to not be, you know, my son repeats things a lot. Like, in order to have a conversation, he'll ask the same question 7 times in a row, because he just wants the back and forth. And so knowing that for someone like my son, who isn't necessarily going to have a conversation with you about some other random thing, he's going to have a conversation with you about, you know, the Point Pleasant Boardwalk, because that's what he loves. And he's going to ask you 10 questions in a row that are all the same, just so you can talk with him about the Point Pleasant Boardwalk. And so just knowing that for adults who have higher needs, who are less verbal, less conversational, might have more cognitive issues, that it's important, because I think these skills can really help those individuals, but to be thinking about that.
Hmm, great. Yeah, and Devin, I think you talked a little bit about working with older other performers, but I don't know if Bluelaces or your work is about including individuals on the spectrum and having that work as them as artists or in the script room. But yeah, I'll throw it your way, so I won't put words
Yeah.
in your mouth.
I was momentarily distracted seeing Kelly's note. I don't know if Kelly left already, but thank you for being here before then. Yeah, it's something that we talk about a lot as a theater company, because for a really long time, the staff itself, we were all volunteer, and we've been volunteer again for the past year as a way of still existing through COVID. And so what we struggled with a lot, which plenty of New York theater companies do, is paying everyone and making that equitable. Because when we talk about inclusion, it's all well and good to have people in the room, but not if you're not paying them for their time, right? So that's something that we initially struggled with. But luckily, in the past few years, through fundraising and grants, we've been able to expand our company, I would say, yeah, in the last 5 years. And so the biggest goal with that was inclusion in general, but particularly, we don't want to create anything for the autistic community without members of the autistic community. So I only joined, 3 years ago. But it's just been such a critical part of our growth as a company to have members of the community active from in every stage, be it running the company, writing the scripts, acting in the performances. Devising the work is a really huge piece for us. I don't think I mentioned that earlier, but we are a devising company in that we create all of our own shows, and we create them through a process that's very creative and invigorating and starts from scratch. Usually a director, or kind of like director, playwright, nebulous position, creative leader in the room has an idea. Like with Suds, the idea from our, at the time, artistic director Allison Mahoney, was she had walked past a laundromat in New Orleans called, I think, Suds, and was like, what a great idea. What if we did a show about laundry so that we could work with these life skills and work through this space and these concepts? But that was it. And so from that point, we hired, I think it was 9 actors at that point, and a stage manager, and everyone just went in the room with a ton of sensory props and started from ground one, talking about experiences, making sensory experiences out of, well, what do you think when you do your laundry? What happens if we use this soap instead of that soap, or this instead of this? And it just kind of developed from there. So that's the process we use for all of our shows. And so particularly in the devising phase, it's critical to have members of the community actively a part of it. Also, of course, in the performance, those are 2 separate stages. So sometimes it's different people, which is a nice mix where we can have a lot of voices involved, including in the script writing. And yeah, across the board, we want to be able to create work, whether we would ever be able to pay people enough money that could be like a full job would be the dream. And I know it's something that we've talked about when it comes to roles in larger companies like Two River that have the financial backing to really be able to make that happen. But at our point, it's definitely a critical part of the process, which is a great thing. I'm trying to think. I had another specific example that disappeared from my brain because somehow it's only Tuesday, but it feels like Friday. So, yeah.
It does. No, that's incredible. I learned about Bluelaces, and then of course I've worked with Devin and talked with her, especially Trusty Sidekick has incredible work as well in New York. And a great gift was going to Lincoln Center and working in their big umbrella festival. And the joy is seeing individuals on the spectrum who are not just performers, who are running events, who are stage managers, who were the best ushers and front of house I've ever seen in my life, of creating that environment of joy of the arts, and doing the job and there's all these abilities and people giving them this employment in this work. So it was incredible to see that. Oh, thank you for posting that in the chat.
Yeah,
Trustee Sidekick, to look into their work.
And just to put this out there, I believe the program at Lincoln Center that you're talking about is actually called the Access Program, which does incredible things across the board, bringing accessibility of many kinds to all of their educational programming. including with the ballet and the opera and the Philharmonic. But they also have a work program that helps train and create jobs for members of this community. They're amazing. Everyone who works at Lincoln Center, especially in the center education, is just the best. So it's a
It's
great
the best.
resource.
And they're, yeah, and I highly recommend if you ever reach out to the Access department. They're really wonderful in providing resources. And a lot of people are like, well, I'm not in New York. My child's not in New York, but they have ways of connections and talking about like things to look for and opportunities. So I do mention that to a lot of parents and guardians to check in with them too, and individuals that come through our residencies. And some have been received jobs and restaurants, and found different ways that they can connect with various people.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend them.
And I will say that Lincoln Center Passport has some awesome virtual programming right now. I'm a little biased because we did 2 pieces with them. So I promise that's not a self-shill. They just have, in general, really awesome work that also incorporates a lot of things that you can do at home. So some of it is asynchronous, which is really fun and active, right? Like you're actually at a show in the moment, but they also have some really great videos that are interactive that come with like an exercise packet you can do at home. They've really thought through virtual programming for these audiences, but during this time across the board with some just very cool artists. So another resource to give a look at.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we've mentioned it a little bit. And I'm curious to hear from other people about, what are some changes that we're facing in this current world. I mean, we're talking about virtual in a way that has been really amazing to me, and some accessibility of a lot of students and individuals who are able to do our exercises or read the books, because now they have the technology, all over the US to kind of tune into our work. But what are some other challenges that you're thinking about right now, or things that we should be keeping in mind during this, this pandemic, right? Because I think in some ways people are thinking about hybrid kind of things, but how are we doing it safely? And but if you have ideas or things that you're individually working on, I'd love to hear that. Because right now, Two River is very much, we're in those talks about doing hybrid things, but right now it's very much virtual and taking care of our students and our staff and whatnot. But we're getting tired, right? A little bit of us are getting tired of the whole digital world because we want to be in the space. But just to think about that, and if you have anything that you're thinking about, just throw it into the universe.
Well, I can jump in, but I feel like I've been talking a lot. So if anyone else wants to jump in first, I can wait. I just find it really fascinating. We touched on it a little bit, but we create a virtual piece and it just felt like such an impossible feat in a way that a lot of this hybrid year has felt impossible at a certain point of just like, man, how much more of this can we do? How can we keep inventing? How can we keep this feeling actually useful and not like we're doing something out of obligation that, well, we should be doing something, so we might as well do it on Zoom, but actually have it be useful. And we as a company found ourselves finding like, are we doing this because we like making this theater for this audience, or are we actually serving the community? Is this something the audience actually needs, or does it make us feel good? But we did end up doing a few smaller pieces for LCE, and then they asked us to do a bigger piece. And what we found was that there were so many more positives than there were drawbacks to the whole experience, because the ability for our audience to be able to join and participate in an experience from their own home, like we all keep talking about the comfort of our own home in a kind of like, sweatpants way, but to actually be in a safe space that you feel comfortable in, that is yours, means that you can then participate in a way that I think can be much more robust. And that's what we found, that audiences that we've known for years, because we're really lucky in that we've been with most of the same audiences for several years now, were so much more engaged in their own way from their own home, because they could participate in a space that felt like their own. And it was one that they had experienced with school, things like that. They had that access point. So accessibility is a word we throw around a lot, but there is so much more you can do in Zoom, be it captioning or an ASL interpreter that you can access, but also just like getting an audience to the theater can be such an immense Herculean task. And it's something that we're asking a lot of families to be like, you have to make it here at this time in this physical place, all of these rules that are around it that are so inflexible. So being able to kind of take another layer of difficulty away from the process has been very exciting.
Yeah, great.
Echoing what Devin just said, and Amanda, you were talking sort of about moving forward with hybrid iterations of a lot of the work that's been happening. I really think that is going to be the way forward. And I know a lot of theater people have sort of been saying, we can't wait to get back in person. We miss sitting in a theater with other people. And of course we do, but also exactly what Devin was just saying of, there's been a lot of people within the disability community who it's taken a pandemic for them to get some of the basic accessibility, you know, the ways into certain programs and shows, and there's financial accessibility and physical accessibility that the pandemic has actually made possible for a lot of folks. And so moving forward, we actually, as a community, a theater community, really do need to commit to like working through that hybrid model in the future, I think, where we're not gonna just ignore all the, you know, amazing solutions and ways of working and communicating with each other that we've discovered through this difficult moment, but we're going to bring what works forward and really make programs in the future, I think, more flexible so that there are options for people, for the people that do better coming into the theater in person and receiving programming that way, that is accessible for them. But for other folks who maybe it is easier for them to participate from home, or maybe they through this experience have gotten to watch theater for the first time and afford theater and feel comfortable watching it in the comfort of their own home, that we're going to make these programs accessible long-term. And yeah, really just, we have to find a way, I think, as organizations to, because I work in, also, I work in adult education and in adult literacy education. And some of our students right now are really struggling with the remote learning. There are so many unique barriers. There's technological barriers. There's so many, right? But some of our students are thriving. And this has been the easiest way for them to work. And they're going to want to continue working this way moving forward. And so I think organizations everywhere right now, I think have to be thinking about how can we think about that hybrid model and do a little bit of both and serve as many people as possible and really remain flexible. I think flexibility is key.
I agree. I think that we're looking at evolution and trying to figure out what that evolution means at this point in time. And I agree that for this particular community, most who live in their homes, I believe there's such a strong comfort level there and there's a familiarity. And for us to be able to find better ways to bring the art to them within their own environment and familiarize and make them comfortable, I feel like that natural evolution is then when we do have more freedom and we can get into the theaters, that community is going to be a little more willing to take that journey with us. Be ready to see those familiar faces that they've seen in this evolution online, and then the reality of being with them in person. I really think we're in a crazy, evolving art period of time. So that's my thought.
And
Yeah.
I think we were talking about this before, when we were talking about like using it as almost like a living social story, right? To create like, here's how we go to the theater, right? Through theater and through this method, so that when we actually go to the theater, we know what to expect. And, you know, what it's like, and there's going to be more noise and there are going to be more people and you're not going to be in your own home, but you experience it first 10 times while you're in your own home. And I think it is, I think everybody's absolutely hitting on something. And I think you're right, Amanda. I think it is an evolution of delivery, and how we deliver services to this community all around the board. I mean, there have been kids who've been doing great online, and others, I mean, my son never, if he wasn't able to go back to school, we would have skipped this whole year. But that both things are valuable and important and serve a purpose and can help the people, the individuals who are better in person to use technology in a way that they didn't before, and those who are better in this realm to maybe ease into actually the physical world in a more comfortable way. Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity, and yeah, there's so much about how we've had to learn to live in this past year that I hope doesn't go away. When everyone just goes, oh, let's just go back outside and back into our and I will say, and this has nothing to do with, and if anyone works in public education, I'm not talking about you. But it's been shocking to me how much, like in general, the education model in schools in our country hasn't shifted. Like it hasn't changed. And I love that we're having this conversation. How do we reach people? How do we bring them in? How do we serve them? How do we do something different? How do we use this technology? How do we use that? How do we use hats? How, where they're just like, well, how do we do everything we were doing before, but on a screen? And not innovating and not thinking of anything new. And I'm sure there's plenty of amazing educators and teachers and parts of the world doing things that are fantastic, but overall it's just been, let's just do school on Zoom. And I'm so glad that that's not what we're doing. We're not talking about just going back to normal and let's do this. I mean, of course not, you're all creative people, so of course you're going to come up with creative solutions, but it's just like a striking difference to me. And I'm glad, and hopefully you can bring this somehow into the world of public education.
No,
Because go ahead.
No, I just find it so interesting that you say that, because I totally agree. And I think part of what fundamentally works as a difference is when you're intentionally building something for the medium, when you're looking at this tool, which is not a tool that any of us would have chosen given the times, but like someone gave us this tool, and rather than trying to shove the thing we used to do, especially in schools, into it and being like, well, I'm going to copy and paste this and hope that it kind of works. I think really successful programs, be they in the arts or otherwise, are the ones that are looking at this and saying, well, what can this benefit? How can this help us? Because there are absolutely benefits to it. And that's really exciting. The possibilities, especially in a hybrid model that allows, because that's always the game, right? Is how can everyone be comfortable at once? How can everyone have the need supported? And to use this to support those needs so that everyone has what helps them function best is tremendous. It's hopeful. I agree with you. That everyone who's like, let's just go back to normal. It's like, wait, no, there were things that we've learned to be better people. So.
Sure. Wow. Yeah, we touched about so much. Thank you so much. I'm learning. I'm like, yes, you're right. And we're exhausted, but we learned a lot, right? We're gaining so much. And I love, Jane, that you mentioned the living social story, because it was incredible. Because I just I had gotten an email about 3 days ago from a dad that I know. And he reached out to me because his son is 16 and hasn't been going out much, but he loves McDonald's. And he was like, we're trying to go inside the building now, right? And he's like, what are some tips you have? And I was like, yeah, let's make a social story, right? And I sent him a McDonald's background for a Zoom. And then I'm going to read the email. He said, look, my child loves fast food. Don't judge me. But I took your advice and we made our own fast food joint. We took the Zoom background and we ordered our food, and he feels confident in ordering that 1/4 pounder with cheese, large, and a McFlurry M&M, but if the machine is out, a pie is fine. And he said that Zoom in this way of the social stories was him being able to rehearse with him. So he, as someone would be in the background, being able to talk to him and then making that order. So there's so many ways, especially when you're talking about job, those abilities with ordering food or doing this, things that we can be inventive with this. And in theater, what is scripted is social interactions that are scripted. And that was what was happening. And how we're using this form. And I love this idea of a social story. And I completely forgot about it. I thought it was like, yeah, just put a Zoom background. And then they just took that information and created, and families were doing this work and supporting that. So if you need a McDonald's background on Zoom, I have that. But what I have is an excitement of what this means for opportunities for people. What more of these living social stories or ways can we keep doing this in this hybrid way for individuals? So thank you all for sharing all of this. And I keep coming up with all these, you're just adding on more to my knowledge, and I'm grateful for all of that. Is there anything else? I don't want to jump over anybody. Oh yeah, Jane.
I was just going to say the wonderful thing about the sort of this living social story is you can also prepare for the inevitable where it doesn't go the right way or it doesn't go the scripted way, right? And so you can script that. You can script where, oh, McDonald's is closed. Now what do we do? Not that McDonald's is ever closed, but he had in his thing the contingency plan that if the shake machine isn't working, he'll take a pie, rather than showing up and, oh man, we rehearsed ordering the shake and the shake machine is out. So because that's a huge thing, you can rehearse things and then something goes awry. It always does. And what better way than, having the unexpected happen. And that's a part of it too. So yeah.
But we can do that also through improvisation. I found that when we utilized improvisation in the classrooms and just the tiniest little game to improv the tiniest little moment and to help through that improvisation to find that flexibility, which is such a difficult concept for those on the spectrum and those who are not neurologically typical. And I think a lot of times with what they struggle with the most, you're in a room and there's a noise that you don't know, and that noise throws you, and that inflexibility to embrace a new sound, a new sight, a new person, a new animal. And I think a lot of the improvisational work that we were doing seemed to be the most impactful and the most practical application, something that they could take beyond what we're doing in that half hour that we have with them in a classroom and take that and apply it outside of the classroom. And I also found repetition was a huge benefit when working with this community, that you repeat it until they become comfortable with it, and then they forget it and they come back to you the next time and you repeat it again until they're comfortable with it. And all of a sudden, 8 classes into something, that comfort level and that flexibility has shifted. And just that, playing those social skill games and those improvisational games seem to be huge in the impact that we have in helping this community function outside of their own environment.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do. I run into some people at Food Town that I see, and they'll do like a heartbeat with me. And I was like, yes, you remember me. And it's, and they're like, yeah, I remember you. I remember what we did. I did a Shakespeare play with you. So it's incredible. So thank you for that. And And that brings me to something else that I want to talk about, and I'll give more space for everyone to, if they have other questions. Oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. I'm trying to think now. Where was I now that I just lost my thought about it? Hello.
We
You
were
just went
talking,
on a wonderful, beautiful thing for me, and now I've forgotten it. Oh, this is what I'm thinking about. When a lot of times we always say, if we build it, they will come, right? We're going to build this cool thing. People are going to show up. It's going to be amazing. And then I had to sit back because I had a wonderful time with Jane, like sitting down and being like, oh, you need to break down the finances for me, Jane. You know, like thinking about how much the state gives for programming and realizing for a lot of the students, it's not, no one's has this $45 an hour for a class. And then on top of that, buying an entire like an ensemble outfit or anything. It's, and that's something I want to open the door to if more people know about this or want to communicate with the group is, finances, like what, I think Jane, you might know what the cost is, like how much, or anybody else, of how much individuals are receiving monthly or for classes. And for us to think about as theater creators or people who are creating more space in art, those financial things that, families are thinking about and individuals because they want to participate. How are we making that accessible? Like Marie was saying, like, are you thinking about all of these things and finances and, then scholarships, but then not making, need-based, like, how are we changing that too? And grants and making this work possible. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about if anyone has any ideas about like the finances so we can start building around that, like making that possible.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, so for adults, the way that it works is you turn 21, you fill out your DDD application, and depending on your level of need, and that's not financial, your level of need for support, you get a budget as an adult. And so that's what you can use for a day program or to put together your own programming. However, and I don't know if Two River is, you can pay for a staff member to go with you to a program that's not a licensed program, but, and I might not be 100% right about this, but you have to use your money for licensed programming. Like you can't just take the money and go do whatever you want. So you get a day program or you have staff that go with you to programming that you pick. If it's not something you can do entirely independently. And then the other thing, and I think Devin, when you were talking about employment, you have to stay in order to continue to receive your SSI benefits. If you receive them, you can't have more than $2,000 in your bank account. So you basically have to be in poverty in order to receive your Social Security. And Brian alluded to this earlier. I think he said, I get help from the state, so I have to be careful, about how much you work. And so this notion that we should be paying everyone, level wages with our typical peers is not always actually a great idea because that throws off people off their SSI and they're not going to be fully working. So there's not a one solution. I mean, one of the solutions is to look into becoming a DDD provider. That's DDD is Division of Developmental Disabilities in New Jersey, but every state has their own name for it. In Massachusetts, it's DDS, and I don't know what it is in New York. And every state has different rules about this because the federal government, Medicaid, gives the state the money. The state has to determine how they're going to distribute that money. And so every state has a statement of transition plan or something. It's something like that. It's called an STP. and how you're allowed to use the money that the federal government sends and what you're allowed to use it for. And we're running into that in our housing project. We can't say we're building a community for individuals with autism because that's isolating. We can't have them in a community because then they're not in the community, which is nuts. It all comes from, we don't want to put people in institutions, but it doesn't allow for, like our public education system, creative models. So there are all kinds of people all over the country who want to create these campus-like environments where you have your own place and there's a staff member who lives in the place with, say, 4 other individuals, and there's programming and there's, community meals, and you go out in the community and then you have services where the community can come in. But the way that a lot of states, especially New Jersey, is set up, they don't know what that means. No, that's isolating. You can't make that. So, and in terms of where individuals can spend their money, it just depends on the individual. If they get their budget, but they're their own guardian, they can make those decisions. If they're not their own guardian, they may or may not be able to make those decisions about, what they're doing all day. And it's tricky. I wish I had an answer for that. There's not one budget. There's not an amount of money that you get. There's not a way that you can spend it. There's not, it certainly makes sense for, I think, organizations to have it, who want to be involved in this work, to have a general knowledge of how the funding model is set up and to pursue or look into becoming a provider for your state's developmental disabilities agency. So you can, I don't know if it's that difficult, but I mean, even for summer camp, a lot of the summer camps, they get DDD approved to be a summer camp, and then individuals can apply for funding to pay for that summer camp. But it has to be a DDD camp, approved camp. So it makes sense to look into it. I don't know if ultimately it makes sense to become a provider, but I think if you're going to be looking to work in this way and be serving adults, it definitely does. Because then the funding is available to you, and it just becomes part of their budget and what they're doing with their money.
It's incredible. Thank you. It's a lot to think about, and when we had talked that conversation, I was like, you're right. I have to make this accessible for the price that they're paying an hour. And then if we're paying people to get a job, we also have to consider those things. So that's a lot of that whole separate funding that we need to be knowledgeable in. And so thank you for sharing that, because sometimes I'm like, I forget. I just assume I go into that world where I think everyone can afford this $25 an hour something program and have the ability to get here in their own transportation. And you have to kind of sit back in that. And I think this time too, being remote has taught me that. Like everyone was saying, you're thinking about all of those things that we kind of maybe miss sometimes. This is incredible information. Thank you, Jane.
And you mentioned transportation. That's another big
so
one.
in our that's another big one. Yeah.
That's another big one.
I was like, we could have a whole series around that. We have about 10 more minutes left. This has been great to learn more from everyone. So, this is a roundtable, and is there anyone else from the audience that has a question or or anyone else here that has a question to bring to the table? And if you don't want to, unmute, you can put it in the chat, but I'd love to hear from other people. So please, yes, this is open floor.
Ladies, I had a question. My name is Krista Kent. I'm a school counselor over in Plano School District. I work with 9th and 10th grade students. And my professional goal this year was to learn as much as I could about autism. And so when I saw your forum tonight, I was very intrigued by it. And I came in a little bit late. Sorry, I had to drop my father off. But I heard you guys say something about social stories. I didn't know if you can tell me maybe a little bit more about that. And if you feel like that's something that I can also help with as a school counselor and working with parents and their youth. I'm working with one right now that we're trying to get him tested to see if he is actually on the spectrum. His father feels that he has regressed quite a bit, especially this past year with the pandemic. And so I was trying to pull from some of the things you were saying and glean from that and see if there's things that I can use. So I was intrigued by what you said about social stories and even improvisation. I would love to know maybe a little bit more about that, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, Kristen, great question. Great question. So social stories are, we were building a lot of these social stories as we had relaxed performances and we're doing other classwork. And it was kind of a guide, a step guide. And anyone else that wants to join in, I know Maria and Amanda and Devin, have some great stuff. We were building these guides to coming to the theater. This is where you'll park. This is where, things of guidance before you come in. So it's not new information. Breaking down content of the play, what's going on, the experience of the day, we were kind of doing of these social stories. And then in some ways, people and other organizations are building social stories of, when you go to the restaurant or when you're going to do laundry, people were breaking down little social interactive stories in that way. Reading at it, looking at images. Oh, this is what I do when I go to the box office, or this is what I do when I go to the counter at the bank. And people were able to use those when they go out in social interactions. And some teachers are finding it really effective. If there's a model that they need to use in the classroom, they're building social stories through images and explaining it through example as well. Even doing a walkthrough. Oh, thank you, Devin. And doing a walkthrough of the space. You would even see people, hi, welcome to the theater, or welcome to this restaurant. This is the bathroom. This is where you can locate the various items. So walking everyone, so it's not something they're just thrown into immediately. And how people even, and families that I spoke of earlier, were using living social stories, using Zoom, going to these places. They tell me Google Earth is a great thing sometimes, like going and seeing the spaces, showing everyone everything, and giving examples of trying to order a coffee or a quarter pounder with cheese. And when they go out and they want to do this, these are examples for them. And that improv is kind of put into that as well, that of, like Jane was saying, and Amanda, you're going A, B, C, and D, and then W comes in there and throws it all out of whack. And how do we then kind of gear around that? How do we kind of flow with that now being introduced? And a father, if the menu wasn't right, we knew what to go to the next thing. But as Jane was saying, what if it's closed? Like, what if it's completely closed? What's the next thing, the next step? And I hope that answered it. If anybody else wants to jump in too, please feel free of what your social stories are, things that you've used as well.
Yeah, I just dropped an example of one that we made for a show in the chat. So for Bluelaces, we make one for every remount of every show that we do, so that it's specific to that cast and to that theater space, so that it's literally like, this is the door that I will go through. This is the bus stop I will get off at. This is where I would go to the bathroom. This is where I'll meet the actors. And so it's really that preparation so that you can kind of have the experience beforehand and therefore be able to enjoy the actual experience. And we find it's really effective. We have a lot of families where audience members will show up with their printed out, like we have a PDF version and they'll print it out, and it's almost like a scavenger hunt where they want to find everyone before the show to see it. It's a really helpful tool, and it's just delightful. So yeah, that's how we use it, but people use it for a lot of different things. I know that legally we have to call it a social narrative because someone copyrighted the word social story, which I find bizarre and terrible, but anyway, that's how we use it, and it's a great tool.
Absolutely. And it's incredible. And you know what? I have to tell you, I've even seen various patrons at Two River tell us they looked at the social story sometimes. And it's helpful. I even do that. I'm like, you know what? Now I know where the bathrooms are. And I think that it has this way of being very inclusive to the, like, on the autism spectrum or neurodiverse and neurotypical people are using this. And I was like, yeah, I think we forget that sometimes. It's like, you should automatically know socially how to walk where all the restrooms are. And it's like, no, I think we should make this accessible to everyone.
It's so useful for people with anxiety disorders. It's such a useful tool across the board. It's like having a map to the experience. I've used them all the time. We all, like, it's just, we use that tool in a lot of different ways, whether you're neurodiverse or neurotypical. We just don't call it that, but we all look on Google Maps to see what's happening, or we check the weather before we leave the house. Like, we all prepare for things. So it's just a fantastic tool in that way. And something else that we do in Bluelaces shows where we make an agenda that's a part of the set. So it's usually incorporated in a kind of like fun, snazzy way, but specific to the show. So in Suds, it's a lot like a giant laundry receipt from a laundromat. And then it moves through the show as we kind of accomplish the different facets of it. But yeah, it's not unlike if you're going to a Shakespeare show, you would check No Fear Shakespeare to make sure you remember how the plot works and you don't get confused. Like, it's just a great tool. Also, Clay, it's great to meet you, and your comment is fantastic.
Yes.
I totally agree.
And Krista,
Thank you
I
for
hope that
sharing.
answered your question. I don't, or
Yeah,
helped you.
that was fantastic. You guys are amazing. And I may have come in a little bit late to this, and I just stumbled onto you guys the other night, but I guess just to make sure I understand, do you all work in like a theater environment? Is that what I'm understanding, that helps support maybe the general population, but also the autistic community as
Yes.
well? Is that what I'm understanding? Or
Oh, yes.
can
So yeah,
oh, that's
I'm at Two
amazing.
River Theater. So some of us are kind of worked with Two
Yeah.
River Theater and various companies. So we're all kind of in that way. And then we have parents and artists and caregivers and guardian. Everyone's in this kind of room of in New Jersey, all over the state, and how we are integrating arts or worked in the arts world. It's a good, amazing mix of us creating this space and working the community.
Krista, one of the things you might have missed that we were talking about earlier in terms of how the arts can help support and come into the autism community and the joy of the arts in the autism community was how theater skills are so suited to being actually a living social story. So when theater artists come in and work with kids on the spectrum or adults on the spectrum, you can actually act out the social story. So it's not a two-dimensional thing anymore. It's not, oh, here's where the theater is, or here's how you make a friend, or here's, what happens when you go to McDonald's. But that you actually practice like with another human being, and you learn, how your words affect another person, how their words affect you, and you can pause and stop. And Amanda was talking about improvisation and some of the work she's done with her students and how beneficial that was when you work with improvisation to learn and understand what happens when the unexpected happens. And I'm not going to speak for Amanda. She could speak much more articulately about this. But that was sort of what we were talking about in terms of a living social story, I think. That might have been what you heard. So I just wanted to include that because bringing theater professionals into schools, classrooms, guidance departments, so that even social workers have tools so that, hey, let's role play this. Let's see what happens if we go and do this thing. I think helps our students to be in the situation rather than having to imagine, which I know for so many kids on the spectrum, my son particularly, it's absolutely impossible. He can't just imagine something that hasn't happened yet. He needs to do it. That sends him into huge amounts of anxiety.
That's wonderful. You all have been so helpful. I appreciate that.
Of course. And so we're also going to send these resources out. So we'll make sure that people have information and like contact information if you have more questions. It's like, we built a whole networking of family and friends. And so this work is, having these resources, it's valuable and vital for us to, because I think we're all very big about, yes, it's Autism Acceptance Month, but it's us like every year, like every moment, every day in our daily diet of doing this work, and not a one-time, here's the month, we're good, May 1st, I'm doing something else. This is our everyday. And how do we keep this and support each other and keep growing? And we're better together when we do it. So we're going to keep sharing these sources. Oh, there we go. And Clay added a really great moment. You know, oh, I see Clay and Dory. I have to tell you that those two individuals are so influential of my work in Texas Tech and bringing this together, and the work that Clay's created too. The Spectrum Theater Ensemble is really incredible. I don't know if he wants to talk. I know we're at time, but we'll keep sharing resources. But very glad to have a lot of people in this room that are doing incredible things and the impact that we have together. So very grateful. So I'm going to make space for anybody else. If anyone else wants to add anything or any questions, I want to make sure you have time as well.
I'll just say thank you, Amanda. This is Clay from SCE. I purposely want to take a back seat because I talk about this work and the stuff going on all the time for my job. And I'm really grateful for someone like Amanda and you here today that can give me a chance to actually sit back and listen and hear more things and other perspectives. So thank you for that. I do advocate that I think the development that's happened across the country is amazing. And I think we're at a time as an industry where these organizations should start conversations about unifying for advocacy, both in legislation and in the philanthropic areas, because the work has proven itself. And I believe there's even data and stuff to back it up. But the awareness, I think, is the next step in getting the kind of support that it sounds, I'm fully agree with you. We all need in order to take the next step. But you guys, I'm so grateful for having helped do the work that got us to this point where I feel like we're ready. So again, I don't want to take time away from this awesome discussion, but thank you for letting me sit in and be a part of it.
It's great
Thank you
to
so
meet
much.
you. Thank you so much.
Great to meet you. And oh, and Clay, if you want, please put your information in too, because I think they have amazing videos too, and I want to see individuals on the spectrum, neurodiverse and neurotypical, working together in this space and creating something pretty incredible. And we've learned this, and we were doing this in school, and I fell in love with the lives that were impacted and everything. So it's pretty incredible. Awesome. Oh,
Right.
yes.
I just wanted to thank you. I'm a high school drama teacher, and I always have students with autism and other disabilities in my classes. And having everybody work together and do improv and creating plays, and in this whole virtual world, we're doing a lot of playwriting and creating their own pieces. And every year I've been teaching a long time, been amazed at how the students work together of all different interests and personalities. And I think it's so important. And Devin, I love the devising. I've done some devising theater, but not in the way that you're doing it. I'm so fascinated by it, that you create the whole environment to make it welcoming and friendly, and it just is so inspiring. And I'm so glad you did this. I'm the only drama teacher in my school, and I miss collaborating like I did in grad school a long time ago. So if you can continue to do more things like this, I would definitely sign up. It's really helpful, and I loved hearing what everybody had to say. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's incredible.
Thank you. It's great to meet
Okay,
you.
we're getting a troop together. We're gonna make more cool art. Oh yes, thank you, Maria and Michael. Oh, great. Thank you so much. And like I said, we're gonna keep sharing these sources. We'll be in touch with everyone too. And we want to have this information and keep sharing all of this work that we're doing and continuing to do. I tell people it's not the end of the month that ends everything. We're gonna continue. And then it's just a goal for us to keep moving and changing together. Awesome. Anyone else have any last things? I know we're run over a little bit of time because you're all incredible people, and that's what happens when you like each other. But if anybody else has any last things, and then we'll close the room. Make sure we all feel good. Awesome. Well, I'm incredibly grateful. Oh yes, Jane.
Nope, I was just waiting to say thank you. This has been wonderful. It's been wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Oh yes, and then Dory posted the Bird Tech players. My heart, the Texas Tech, yes, please check them out. Incredible resources there, and what Texas Tech has done and changing the game, I think, in a university. Incredible work. Well, I'm incredibly grateful for all of you for being here and for listening, for making change and impact. And you being here and sharing this or just listening is already improving what we're doing and the work we continue to do at Two Rivers. So I hope you feel welcome to reach out to us at Two River and other individuals here and with your questions and whatnot. So this isn't a one-time thing for me. This is, if you need something, why not reach out to me? And I'm always going to be there to try to help. And I know a lot of these faces here too will also do the same. So thank you. So let's keep doing the thing that we do and doing it together. So thank you so much for your evening, spending your evening with us. Wonderful. Night, everybody.
Thanks, Amanda.